Hello, it's Alex here from Australia, and what I'm going to do here on this particular video is take you step by step through the process of recapping or remanufacturing a trackpad for your FV432. We're going to use a product from Era Polymers, and the hardness of this product is advertised to be equal to or even harder than the original pad. The system that I've developed is a capping system using a mould, and that particular mould can be used for either capping or remanufacturing a complete pad. So what I'm going to do now is to take you step by step through the process, and hopefully this particular video will help those people that are trying to obtain new pads, not being able to, or those people that may be thinking of trying to resurrect or recap their own pads. I've tried a lot of different methods and materials, and I find that this latest thing that I've come up with, this latest capping idea, seems to be the best that I've come up with so far. We've got these pads on our vehicle at the moment, and we're running around with it quite fine. You'll probably notice that different surfaces affect your pads in different ways, and I found through my studies that the best ground you can drive over with your FV432 and make the least damage to the pads are a soft, muddy sort of a road or paddock, or even a good hard, smooth bitumen surface. Doesn't seem to hurt the pads much, but the small, hard, rocky surfaces seem to take great chips out of the corners or edges of the pads and do the most damage. In saying that, the pads that I'm creating here, well, are not impervious from that either. You'll find that they'll wear and chip exactly the same as a new set of pads, so expect to sort of get the same life out of them as you do with a sort of new set of pads. At the moment, cost, I'm making these particular pad recaps for about $8 Australian a pad. And that's pretty competitive with what new pads cost. Not only what they might cost, but you may not even be able to find any to purchase. So here we go, step-by-step guide on how to recap your existing track pads. Okay, in this section I want to talk about the construction of making your mould to make your track pads or to recap your track pads. I just want to go over how I made my mould. By the way, this is a prototype, but it's probably good enough to use forever and ever, but there you go. Yeah, what I did, I've got myself a nice flat bit of steel, just happened to be the right width, and I drilled my hole for my anchoring point for the centre stud in the appropriate spot. And what I did, I then got myself a new pad, and I bolted it down onto this bit of plate. And I could have used an old pad if I didn't have a new one, but I just thought I'd use the new one because I had it. And once I got that down bolted onto the base, I then got some other pieces of metal and put them on the sides and made sure that they came into contact with the pad, so I'd get the right size. Now, when I say come into contact with the pad, the interesting thing was I wanted it to touch along that edge there, because even on the worn pads, I'll grab a worn pad, even on the worn pads you can see that edge is still a significant part of the pad, and that's where I want the seal, so to speak, for the mould to press up against. So yep. All right. So I positioned my pieces of metal, my sides, and you can see there where I've just put a rough tack. I put a rough tack over here, and a rough tack here and here along the bottom, and then I've positioned the other side. And from the other side, because the pad slopes a little bit, you can probably see the slope on the pad on this side, the way that they slope a little bit. Yep. So what I actually did, I used two pieces of metal here, one at a slight angle and then one pretty parallel, to get that contour on the mould. So again, I tacked these in place. Just I'm not the best welder in the world, but I tacked them on. And after I get them satisfactory, tapped them around with a hammer or whatnot and got them right, I then made my ends, and I tacked my ends on, and more or less I had the mould to the right size, but it wasn't, of course, welded up correctly. So I got it tacked up, and then I took it down to a local welding shop and got them to get their MIG welder and their more professional tradesperson to properly weld right around the seam of my mould. Okay, so I was pretty happy with the result that I got there. So when I got it home, I then drilled two holes for the studs that I've put in to remove the pad from the mould once they've set. So I just used the 1/2 inch UNF bolts and tapped them out to the right thread size. And that mould there has already made nearly 200 pads. So again, if I was going to do this again seriously, instead of making just one mould like I've done here, I would certainly think of making a bank of moulds, and I would probably along this way, I would make a series of perhaps 10 moulds and just run one side right through the 10 moulds, so I would have 10 ready to go. So that would make the making of these pads less arduous. I'd be able to do them in, say, lots of 10, which would mean I'd only need 20 pours, and I'd have it done. I could do it in a month. You'd have a brand new set of pads. But you could probably, once you got into the swing of things, you could tack these together in no time flat, and get them all ready to take down and to your local welding shop and get them to seriously weld them up properly and nice and smooth. And if there's any daggy edges on them, of course, you can just run a Dremel along there and clean them out. But there you go. So when we pour our mould, we just spray the release agent around the mould so that it'll release properly. And one thing worth mentioning: all of the sides bevel out slightly. Every side of the mould bevels out slightly, so that when you put the pressure on your bolts to get it out, it'll come out much easier. It doesn't get stuck in the mould. Of course, they set pretty hard, and any little irregularity in the mould certainly makes them a little bit harder to get out. Okay, now once we've got our mould made and ready for use, of course, what we've designed it to do is to make these ones and to recap them. So what you do simply is to bolt them in and pull them in with the centre bolt here into place, ready for capping. Or if you're going to manufacture complete new pads, and here we've got a pad plate that I've removed all the rubber from, and how I did that was simply by putting it in a fire and burnt it off. As simple as that. Just burnt it off, and then I just gave it a buff up with a wire buff wheel, run a die nut over the thread, and voila, ready to go, brand new all over again. I was told by a so-called person in the know in the trade that rather than put them in a fire, you can just heat the back of them up with a portagas flame, a nice big torch, and get this relatively hot, and the rubber pads should just pop off, so they say. So rather than trying to burn the whole pad off, you might try that idea of heating it up with quite a hot torch, and now the rubber pad should just pop off. Okay, now when I make my recaps, I use a bonding agent or a solvent that allows the bonding of the material that I use to the existing rubber pad. But you can also get a bonding agent that will bond the material to steel. So if you had this roughed up, so to speak, and lovely and clean, and no oil or grease on it at all, and apply the manufacturer's bonding agent to this, I can't see any reason why you couldn't manufacture complete new pads rather than going through the the recapping process. So whether you're manufacturing new pads or you're manufacturing reconditioned pads, yep, you can use the same mold for either. So let me just put it in the right way. So there he is, ready to mold a new pad. Okay, so that's that section done. In this section here, I'd like to talk about the preparation of a pad for recapping. So what I've done, I've removed these particular pads that are, you can see, pretty badly worn. They're practically down to the metal on the machine. I've removed them, and I've just given them a good clean with a hose. I'm lucky enough to have a very high pressure water supply, so I was able to blast all the mud off and get it all relatively clean. So I've given it a good clean. The next thing I do is I run a die nut over the thread so that I can put my nut back on again and pull this into the mould to do the recapping. And then the next thing I do is I mark out these particular holes or dowel holes that I want to drill into the existing pad. And what I've done, I've simply got a piece of cardboard, cut it out to the right size and punched a few holes in the cardboard template, so I can simply get a little bit of nail polish paint and dab it into the correct places prior to drilling, so I can get my positioning, you know, within a few seconds. Don't have to sit there and mark out each pad. So what I use to drill these out is this lovely little hole drill bit that I've managed to get on eBay from China, probably about $7, and that allows me to drill this rubber out quite easily with a nice clean hole. So I think the hole size that I've drilled is about 16 millimeters. So yep, stick it in the bench drill, and the way that I've positioned the bench drill is such that that this particular drill will drill down, but it'll still leave about 2 millimeters of rubber untouched between the pad and the backing plate. I'll just show you a backing plate. So this is a pad backing plate. So what I'm doing, I'm drilling down to within 2 millimeters of the backing plate, but I'm leaving the rubber intact at the bottom of the hole, still bonding onto the plate. Okay, the reason that I chose to do this is I love the great bond that I still maintain with the old pad between the existing steel plate and the worn out pad, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to retain by capping these things. So by capping them, I still get the great bond between the existing pad and the steel backing, and then all I have to do is make a capping or a recap for it. And yeah, so that's basically it. Using the dowel holes to give me extra shear strength for my capping, and later on I'll be explaining how I prepare the pad ready to be capped. So okay, so that's what I do in preparation to capping my pads. The drilling operation, yep, and cleaning operation. Okay, in this part here, I'm going to show you how I prepare my pads before I put them in the mould, to make sure that they're clean. I get rid of any contaminants on the surface of the pad before I go to the next step. And what I do is I basically, well, sort of scrub off the surface with a wire brush. And if at the time when I do this process I find any splits or cuts in the sides of the pad, what I'll do is I'll try and treat that cut or split as though a dentist would treat it prior to putting a filling in. If that pad was torn across there, I just take a hacksaw and cut a V so that I got a nice clean bond on the material when it fills the imperfection in the pad. So I'll just show you what I actually do to prepare this pad with a wire wheel prior to recapping. Okay. So let's do one. It certainly roughs up the surface and gets rid of all the crap that's on there. And mind you, if I find any rocks or little pieces of metal that are in any of these little crevices here, I prise them out with a screwdriver as I'm doing this. The top section. Okay, there it is there, all been cleaned up and prepared for the next step prior to recapping. In this section here, I want to talk about the actual material that I use to recap these track pads. First of all, you've got to apply. I'll better start off at the very beginning. The stuff that I use is made by a company called Era Polymers. Era Polymers Proprietary Limited. And you can find them on the internet. Era Polymers Proprietary Limited. If you can't buy this material, well, if you don't live in Australia and you need to buy it somewhere else, I'm sure that you could find it for sale in your country by having a look around on the internet, or even contacting these people in here, and they may be able to tell you where you can get it in your country. Okay, and the stuff that I'm using is called Aeropol CC 95A. So it's got a shore strength of 95, and the mix is 100 to 15. 100 of part A and 15 of part B. And it's air drying, and ideally it's supposed to be dried at a certain temperature, which is above air dry. It's probably, if you look at the fact sheet, it probably says something around about 60 degrees C. So if you live in a cold country and you want to get the best possible results from this stuff, follow their product guide. You might have to make yourself a little oven, but here in Australia the temperature is quite warm enough in summertime to air dry it. And the way that I do it is I do it on the hotter months of the year, and then I put it out in the sun after I take it out of the mould for about a day or so, which gets it up quite hot. The sun here in Australia is quite hot, and the pad will actually warm up so hot in the sun that you can't even touch it. So yeah, things sort of work out well. Anyway, that's the stuff that I'm using. That's the part A. The part B, same stuff. Aeropol CC95 part B. So that's the 15 part of the mixture. And prior to moulding the or prior to recapping the pad, this particular primer that's actually made by the same company's got to be applied. So you buy it in a litre. PR 1167 primer is specifically designed to bond the this particular product that I just spoke about to rubber. So what I simply do is I use a small paintbrush, and I actually paint this onto the pad, and you've got to let it dry until it's tacky, which usually takes here in Australia about an hour, and then it's ready to put into the mould and pour over the top. But this stuff here ensures a perfect bond between the new recapped material and the existing pad, which is made of rubber. Now look, comes into question, do you need the dowel holes, or could you possibly get away without the dowel holes? I don't know the answer to that. Would this primer bond the new material well enough to the existing rubber? I just simply don't know the answer to that. On the side of safety, I've decided to drill these holes just to make sure that it gives me a little bit more strength between the recap and the original pad. I also saved the shavings from these holes, and I put them through a sieve, and I only keep the smallest granules. And what I do is I actually mix a small part of that back in as a filler into the A and B mixture, which gives me a little bit more, well, they go a little bit further. My material goes a little bit further by using a little bit of a filler in it as well. But we'll get to that when I show you the mixing and pouring of the pad. In this step here, I'm actually applying the primer to the pad prior to pouring the recap on the top. So yeah, just brush it on. It's almost like water, and around all the surface that you want the new material to bond to. So it's a little bit arduous, but hey, I'm only doing one at a time. If you were pouring a lot, you'd probably think of a better way to do this, but yeah, anyway, there you go. Now look, as far as brush cleaning is concerned, I haven't really found anything that you can clean your brushes with. Everything doesn't work. So it's either a once-off throw away with a brush, but what I found is giving the brush a really hard scrub on a piece of old towel seems to take most of the material off the brush bristles, and then I'm able to dunk it into a container of water, and it seems to last for probably 10 or 15 pads before I have to throw the brush away. But there you go. Okay, so I had some smaller brushes, and I've used all them up so far, so I'm just stuck with this rather large brush to do this particular pad. So after I apply the primer to these pads, what I've got to do is I've got to let the pad rest, and that usually takes the best part of an hour to get to the sticky sort of surface, you know, a little bit like contact adhesive, you know, when you're ready to put the two together, contact adhesive. But yeah, so, and it's very important that you get it on all of it, because this is doing the bonding, and you really want your new surface to really stick. So yeah, so there she is, all ready to go. So about an hour later we'll resume, and we'll make the pad. In this step here, I've got the pad that's been prepared with the primer, and it's now tacky like you'd expect contact adhesive to be. I'm going to put it into the mould ready for casting. Okay, it pulls in rather tight. By the way, I've prepared the mould with release agent prior to this, so that it'll come out, and you can get that release agent from the people who supply the Era products, the people who supply the product. Or if you want to, you can even use spray-on cooking oil. Is a pretty good alternative to the bought stuff. Yeah. Okay, so we pull our pad in tight into our mould. So there it is. A bit of a quick look. So there it is, there, ready for casting. So the next step will be we'll be mixing up the ingredients and casting our cap. We are about to mix up the cap and apply it to the top. So just to save time, what I've done, and by the way, it's started to rain here, which is very annoying for the audio, but it's the way we've got to put up with it. I've already I've pre-poured the part A already. In fact, I did that because I had the remnants of one tin and I had to start a new tin, so sort of saved things. So what I do is I zero my scales, and by the way, you can buy these scales on on eBay for about 10 bucks. So ready to put in my part B. And for this particular one, it's 28 grams. There we go. Get my mixing stick here, and just to give it the colour, what I do is I get a tiny little bit of black oxide that you would normally use for colouring concrete, and I plonk it in, and away we go. We start to mix her up. Now this stuff's pretty forgiving. It doesn't go off very quickly. It allows you plenty of time for mixing. It's not one of these things that just goes voomp and goes off. So if you sat here and stirred for about 5 minutes, it probably wouldn't make any difference at all. But generally I can get it mixed up within a minute or so. So I'll just continue to mix this. Very annoying that it started to rain. Start something and the weather changes here so quickly. Anyway, so there, it's pretty well mixed up there now. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some ground up powder that I've got when I drilled the holes out on the pad. So I'll just grab some of that. And this is a little container here of the ground up powder. I tip that in as well. That's my filler, just to make it go a little bit further. Sorry about the rain. Give it a good mix in. By the way, I found that when you pour these, it's much better to leave them a full 24 hours before you take it out of the mould. If you take it out prior to that, you can actually tear the pad, which makes it a little bit awkward. You have to start again and re-prepare it. So there we go, we're all ready to go. So we're going to pour it now, and I generally pour it pretty slowly, just so it sort of seeps into to all the holes and crevices. You're probably thinking, has he got enough of this stuff to make the pad? I assure you I do have, because I've worked out the exact amount that I need. And that's easily done by filling one of these up with water and then measuring the contents of the water after you tip it back out. Anyway, as you can see, it's quite easy to work with. We're just about done. Okay, perfect. There's always a temptation to keep fiddling, but the whole idea now is to simply walk away for 24 hours before we pull it out. And that should be our capped pad. In this section here, what we're going to do is we're going to take our track pad that's been moulded in the mould, as we would have seen in the last section. We're going to take it out of the mould and just have a look and see what we've created. So the way I do this, I put it in my vise. And first thing I do is I I take out the retaining nut that held it in there with the pin or the thread, and use the 1/2 inch NF screws that I've installed to actually push it out of the mould. So let's see how we go. And she's popped on that side, and a bit more persuasion up here. Here she comes. Okay. Mind you, this has been in there for 24 hours and has set very, very firmly, probably up to about 80% of its hardness. So let's just take the mould back out here. We'll have a bit of a look at what we've got. So there's our completed pad, and you'll see that that it's bonded very, very nicely to the existing rubber all the way around. We've got back to the right thickness here, and as far as the hardness is concerned, a bit hard to tell yet, but it's probably equal to the original pad already. And mind you, this will in fact harden up about another 20% in the next 24 hours when I put it outside in the sun. Ideally, I would put it into an oven at this stage and take it up to the temperature that's stipulated in the instructions for using this material, but unfortunately I don't have one of those. So what I do is I just drop it into the onto the concrete out in the Australian sun out here, and it'll bring it up to about 50 degrees, and it'll sit there all day. You notice there's a couple of dags on the back here where the rubbers, only one on this one, where the rubbers, or where the urethanes come through. What I do is I just take a knife and cut that off and just clean it up. So there it is, the completed item. You've got yourself one track pad, fully complete, and in a day or so ready to install on your machine to take the place of the worn pad that came off. Okay, I've just brought the finished pad out here, a bit of light so you can get a bit of a look at it, what it looks like, and you can see the seal there between the existing rubber and the polyurethane. It's certainly looking very, very bonded, I'm telling you, and there she is, ready to go back on the machine.